have here is the final lecture by curator of Museum of Contemporary History in Ljubljana, Marko Štepec, who is also the selector and curator of this exhibition. The exhibition will also continue in the other space when we release the projector, because we only have one, and it will project some images from the same period. It's about the beginnings, very beginnings, the pioneering era of aerial photography, which coincides with the World War I. So Marko Štepec, who was researching that phenomenon, will tell us some more about that. So yes, please.
Thank you, Mika. Good evening to you. First of all, I would like to greet all of you. My name is, like Mika said, Marko Štepec. I'm historian, curator in the National Museum of Contemporary History in Ljubljana. We have a big collection of the photographies from all the 20th century. From the time of First World War, we have around 10,000 of photographies on the glass plates, negatives, and on the paper films. So today I will try to say a few words about the war photography and photo collection and some photographer we discovered last year when we made the exhibition on the centenary of the First World War named "We Never Imagined Such a War Like This." We were very proud that we found three very interesting photographers from Slovenia, who was the soldiers in the Austro-Hungarian army. They got the camera with them on the battlefield, and they left us very nice picture from the battlefield. In fact, I will start with August 1914, where everything began. In summer 1914, most of the mobilized soldiers all over Europe went to war. The soldiers of Austro-Hungarian army from Slovenian mobilization area had to go. Most of them, more than 90%, go to the Galicia, to the Eastern Front against Russia. The departure scenes of mobilized soldiers were similar all over Europe. They were escorted and cheered by the people on their way from the barracks to the railway station. You see, this is the one of the photos of the photographer Henrik von Oberreiner from Ljubljana. He was from the noble Czech family. He wasn't a photographer, he was an amateur, but he was rich, so he got the camera, and he left us very nice pictures of leaving the soldiers from the Ljubljana to the Galicia, and then the first months of the life on the first miles of the battles. The roads were decorated by flowers and flags. In spite of anxiety which was felt in the farewells from their relatives, a general enthusiasm in war agitation, as well as progressive, aggressive propaganda could be felt everywhere. Before their departure, there were massive farewell masses, and at the railway station a mixture of patriotic feelings and also a lot of sadness, of course, could be seen. There you can see the relatives on all the stations, from Ljubljana to Przemysl, from Ljubljana to Krakow, from Ljubljana to Stri, which was the last railway station on their way to the battle. Crowds of young men thus abandoned their civil life, wives, girlfriends, children, friends and parents, and went across the Hungarian plains, in the Slovene case of course, towards the eastern battlefield and experienced their tragic meeting with the war. A Slovene officer of Austro-Hungarian army, one of the regiments from Ljubljana, Home Guard regiment from Ljubljana, Herman Vidmar, described his way to the battlefield in his unpublished manuscripts. I quote, "On the 14th August, my battalion was ready for departure. The walk to the station was triumphant All of Ljubljana was there. The people decorated us with flowers and ribbons. We were one of the first transports destined to Galicia from Ljubljana railway station. The ride to the battlefield was partly a triumph and partly a torture. We did not know where up until the last moment. Among the great mass of mobilized soldiers who had to abandon their civilian lives and departed for the battlefields were also many artists and both amateur and professional photographers. Some of them were aware of the uniqueness and importance of the events that they were experiencing and tried to preserve them with writing, or in that case we are talking about with the aid of photographic apparatus or photographic paper and glass plates. The First World War was thus the first war that was really photographed en masse. Writing and taking photos had in fact some reason. Many soldiers want to prevent their mind from dehumanization and the memory from oblivion. These are the photos of Henrik von Oberreiner. His experience was like the private Ivan Maticic, one of very well-known Slovenian writer in his memories on the First World War, wrote, which were published, his memories were published 2 years after the First World War. I quote, our troops went on like the cattle taken to a slaughterhouse, without leaders and headless. Before we always thought everything would go as well as it did on the training ground and in parades. But now everybody kept falling everywhere, twisting in blood, moaning, hiding, escaping. Thunder everywhere, whistling, everything was flying all around us. The Galician fields had bled. We never imagined war like that and were never told of it by our officers. This was the consequences. And Henrik Oberreiner, who took those photographs of the departure from Ljubljana in the Galicia battlefield, was, like I said, not a photographer, I mean professional photographer, but he was from the noble family and he became a captain in the 17th Infantry Regiment, so-called Krajinski Janezi, Krnolian Jacks from Ljubljana, and he took the camera to the battlefield. In August 1914, he was in the first battle. He was wounded. He was wounded. The first battle in one small village in Galicia called Majdan Goluborski, but the war was not over for him as he expected, and he was happy that he was wounded. He went. The bullet which had stuck in his arm was removed in one of the Vienna hospitals, war hospitals in Vienna, and he was happy. He was very glad that he saw that he will go home, but he would go home. But the war was not over for him as he expected, and so he had to return back to the battlefield. And at the start of December, a postcard addressed to him was returned, and his wife, the well-known sculptor and artist Elsa Oberreiner, knew that Henrik was among the crowds of missing soldiers during the withdrawal across the Dukla Pass in the Carpathians. They had never found his body. He only left a photo album and a memory piece of a stone, with the shrapnel that wounded him. This is the kind of paperweight made in Zalotz. Henrik Oberreiner never saw this memorial object. He never saw that object which stayed behind him in family collection altogether with the photographs we talked about. In fact, some facts. We still don't know the exact number of the soldiers from Slovenia and Austro-Hungarian army who died in Galicia. But we know that the number of mobilized soldiers was rising very quickly. Because of the great losses, they needed to fill the troops with new battalion. That means around 1,000 of soldiers, of young soldiers. of soldiers every single month. Encountering death and massive dying on the Eastern Front, at the same time the Balkan Front against Serbia, and later on the Socha and Tyrol Front, as well as on the Piava battlefield against Italy, left a great impact on their memory. A private Maxim Oncic, who died in the trenches few years later in the Eastern Front also, described his impression of the war landscape in a moving way. The ground was turned up and downtrodden. Wherever I looked, I could see only dead bodies. Ours and the enemy's bodies were thrown upon each other, all of them peacefully lying together. A little bit further on, there was a cannon, next to it a couple of butchered horses, among them a mess of raged clothes. Unlike Henry Oberreiner, Stanko Rajan, sitting on this picture, next picture, was a photographer. He completed secondary technical school, Gewerbeschule in Graz, and 2 years electromechanical school in Vienna. During the First World War, he served as a reserve officer with his military unit in Galicia, and later on the Italian-Austro-Hungarian front as a lieutenant, later first lieutenant in the Austrian army. Because of his rank and technical education, he commanded motorized units for most of his period of army service. He always had a camera with him on his path through the fronts, and he left an extensive fund of extremely high quality photographs, both formally and in terms of content, which are an important contribution to the First World War photography collection in our museum, and also I think in all Slovenian heritage of the war. He survived the war and died on 8 October 1965 and is buried in the family grave near Ljubljana, in Ribnica. We discovered his photographs at the time of preparing our centenary exhibition last year. Stanko Oražan sent his photos of Galicia battlefield to Vienna newspapers in the time of the war, and bought a new large format camera with the payments he received. It must not be forgotten that he was an amateur photographer who did not have time to take pictures during actual service, during military operations. Perhaps he therefore photographed that much more so that he could contemplate and interpret the traumatic experiences of war, like wrote his grandson Oražan. His grandson also wrote about the documentary note in his photographic collection and about poses between fighting, which were also a brief time for his grandfather's privacy, and he used this time for shooting with camera. About his photographs, his grandson who lives in Germany wrote, "Each of the approximately 400 First World War photographs that my grandfather left required time. This was not time during fighting, but a kind of in-between time, a time of preparation as well as waiting and rest. His rank allowed him to command the moments in between. He could take time for himself and others to be able to take a picture before. Before what? Before and after the moments of dying." Despite the great technical development of photography and photographic material, photographers in that time were still limited in their choice of motive to more static scenes. Since 35mm cameras with all the technical advantages for photo reporters were only developed in the 1920s years of the 20th centuries. Today, when almost every electronic device includes a photographic function, it's almost impossible to imagine how complex and hard and laborious taking a photograph was about 100 years ago. And so in that time, the photographic image was really the result of technical knowledge, and a lot, and the product of a lot of equipment. No, in those photos, this is the equipment of Stanko Oražan, which is preserved with his family in the family collection. Last year we had all those cameras and the book from which he learned the knowledge of the photography. The book from the time before the First World War was in our collection. Janko Vertin was a photographer, also the collectionist of military material and equipment, and he left the testimony of the procedure of taking reconnaissance air photographs. He was the pilot, and he was one of those brave pioneering pilots who took those photos we saw on those exhibition, in these walls. And Janko Vertin wrote, as a pilot, I did not have direct contact with the camera. Photographer technicians at the airport arranged everything. These are not the photographs of Janko Vertin. These are some photographs from our collection, from glass plates, from the first front line of the battlefield on the Karst region, where the battle were most bloody and really took a lot of life of the soldiers of all the European nations, of the Middle European nation who fought in the Austro-Hungarian army. Janko Vertin about the air photography. The camera was below the plane. At the side of the plane was mounted a wizard called a sotoscope, like a sort of a bottle. I looked at a small screen from my seat and actuated the camera by pulling on a trigger or handle. Focal lengths were from 50 to 120. When I landed, the laboratory technicians dismounted the camera, developed the plates and entered the data. Aircraft, date, number of pictures, as well as height and focal lengths. Sorry. This is the camera. I'm sorry. No, this is the camera for the airplanes. This is the photo of unknown German photographer who was in the unit in the time of breakthrough near Kobarit, near Kukurito in October 1917, and that kind of cameras were used near the Piave River, on the battlefield near the Piave River. You can imagine how big it is and how hard to handle was with those kind of cameras on the airplane. In that time of very pioneering, also all the flying was very danger, and all the pioneering time for the flying, for the pilots, for the aircraft, and so on. Yes. This photo, During the period of the war, air or aerial photography developed exceptionally in technical terms. It was an important technical and photographic innovation in planning military operations, since it was for the first time in history that the photography were using for planning military operations, since it enabled direct information about the opponent's position and fortifications. Not only pilots and photographers were important in this, such as mentioned Jan Kovertin and also Rudolf Beno Hammeritz in the Slovenian photographic history. This is the picture of the Rudolf Beno Hammeritz. Rudolf Beno Hammeritz, he was the legendary pilot and air photographer who died in the airplane on the Romanian front. These are his only photographs which were preserved by his family. The only photographs we know. Sorry. But also in photographic laboratories, and were a lot of photographers employed, very well known in Slovenia. In Slovenia, photographic history is the photographer Egon Pelikan from Celje. His first employee and his first job like a photographer was somewhere in Hungary, where he made the photos made by the airplane, by the pilots, by the observers, and so on, the Beobachter, like the German says, and fitted them with technical and geographic data on the glass plates usually. And also on the paper, on the glass plates or on the paper. After the beginning of fights along the river Socha, yes, the photos were. I won't go back to those PowerPoint projection. A large part of after the beginning of the fights along the river Socha, a large part of territory of Slovenia belonged to the narrow zone of the military area, hinterland, in which special military law enforcement and court martial were introduced. Several rights have been either abolished or limited, and the court martial introduced jurisdiction over the civilians too. And so war brought, of course, many changes to the everyday life. We can perceive the changes in the mobilization system, the militarization of the people, the work mobilization of women, and the incorporating of forced laborers in the production. There was not only a mobilization of the national servicemen, which comprised more than 60% of the male population between the age of 21 and 42, but also total mobilization of all the possible human and economic capacities, as well as the natural resources. The economy was militarized. A very important role was given to several state departments, from war supply offices to the propaganda and press offices, which firmly connected civil life with the military administration. And here we have also the story about the photography. The photography began to play an important role in the propaganda project of the Count Kaiser und Königin Kriegspresskartier, so-called department for the military news and office department. Already in the beginning of the war, Austria-Hungary established a huge war propaganda system. Also included various artists, from writers and painters, writers like Stefan Zweig, poet Rilke, many Slovenian writers in Slovenia, and also the photographers known at that time and unknown. Here we have the picture of a very important Slovenian photographer from the beginning of the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, Frank Vesel. He was very important for the art history because of his pictures. He preserved the pictures of the most well-known Slovenian artists, like Impressionists, which were important in those Vienna circumstances and so on. In the time before the First World War, it was Frank Vesel. And because The World War destructively impacted the spiritual world and shattered the faith in human values and the world of the past. It left important traces in art as well. In muddy trenches filled with death and suffering, generations of survived soldiers sharpened their views of life. Also the artists. The life in the rear was influenced by the refugees and prisoners of war who were included in the war process. Over 80,000 civilians were moved from the area of battles by the military authorities and were displaced to different refugee camps to their relatives in the central part of the country. We have a very nice collection about the unknown photographers who made the pictures in the refugee camps, the pictures of children, the pictures of women, the pictures of school in the refugee camps, and also on that pictures we can see all that what the war brings to the civilian life, all the catastrophe the war brings to the people. On the town streets in that time, a lot of handicapped people, blind among them, appeared. Due to the growing military needs, a lack of labor force and trade blockades, a nutrition crisis soon appeared, and it increased to the level of starvation all over the country, from Vienna to Trieste, from Berlin to Trieste also. The growing lack of food, which resulted in maximum prices and the introduction of the ration cards, as well as endeavors to find industrial substitutes for different foods, influenced the changes of eating habits and caused social rebels. And here we have Frank Wesel. In this picture we can see him. He was one of the most important Slovenian photographers from the beginning of the 20th century, and he left us the photo of rebellion of Slovenian soldiers in May 1918. Austro-Hungarian soldiers and civilians, when the war entered its 5th year, when it was the time when the fight into the emperor, all the propaganda, and so was not enough to die for on the battlefields, and it was replaced by the growing dissatisfaction. On the photos of Frank Wesel, we can see a lot of this dissatisfaction in his images he left. So I won't talk anymore. I will finish on that point, and don't hesitate to ask me. I will try to if you have any question about our collection, about the First World War, about the yes. Thank you very much. I will go back with photos because I lost some photos. Here is also the photographs from the Romanian front made by Bruno Hammeritz. He lived near Ljubljana. These photos are in family collection, and you can notice that they are without technical data, which are usually the point of the photos. Technical data, it was very important for the yeah. So this is the collection from the original plates. No. There are some photos of refugees from the Isonzo Karst region, women with children, the men are at the front. I'm very sorry that we don't know all the name. The most of the name of the photographs are, I'm sorry, unknown. So it is. So it's the nature of collection. This is the refugees from there. Galicia battlefield, the Italian soldiers in the prison camp in Ljubljana. Over 70,000 of Italian soldiers went through Ljubljana castle, where was a kind of quarantine station for the war prisoners. And in Ljubljana castle, there was a photographer named Peter Naglic, an important Kamnik photographer, and that are some of his photos. You will see on that photo, it's very interesting, on the right side. On the right side of the picture you see the Russian prisoners of war from Russia, and on the left side you see the mobilizing women, because of the lack of the men. Men was on the front, were on the front. But here also Ljubljana was very well known because of cigarette factory, tobacco factory, cigarette factory. Most of the employee was the women, but in industry, in the heart industry, there were no experience with the women. The women behind the machine, women behind the line, women behind those. This is one of the innovations of the First World War. This is for the official album of the Fifth Army who fought Austro-Hungarian army who fought near the Isonzo front, and all the hinterland in fact was there were a lot of workshops all over from Ljubljana to Trieste. Here we are on the first line of the battlefields, where, like one of the soldiers wrote, we lost everything human that we had. This is maybe the nice sentence to start.
Marko, could you tell us some more about these aerial photographs? How are they preserved? So this is basically on negatives or some plates as well?
Yes, we have some plates. We have some photographs on paper. Bruno Hammerlitz is on plates. The unknown photographers are on paper. But what we see here in this room is 10 photographs from 2 albums, official albums from the Piava battlefield, from the Piava river. First album is the official report from April 1918. It was 2 months before the last offensive, Austro-Hungarian offensive in the Italian battlefield, and those photographs was very important for the plans. And the next album, the other album, is from the September 1918, the same location, 2 months before the end of the war. You know, those unless the air photography didn't help Austro-Hungarian army. The weight of the soldiers were less than 50 kilos. So no airplane photo can help the army, which was unsatisfied, which was very bad condition in the meaning of food, in the meaning of with equipment. The Germans went back to the Western Front. The Austro-Hungarians stayed alone on the Italian front, and they made same mistake like before the breakthrough near Caporetto. They started the offensive more than 120 area, with the soldiers, which was very unsatisfied, and so the weather was very bad, and the offensive stopped. The first time in the time of the war, the newspaper asked the public, asked why asked about the victims, asked about the senseless, asked about why are we in fact fighting for, and so that's it. Yes.
I would like to know what is the size of this region in the album?
Yeah, it's around 15 to 18 centimeters in album and 10 and 50 format, classical format. Some of them are in those kind of in many parts. They were connected together after in the studio. They were connected together in more than A4 format, A4 paper, 2A4 maybe, and put together in the album. So yeah, the officers could get the bigger picture of the battlefield.
In terms of military history,
yeah.
Is it documented how effective actually all aerial photography was? I mean, because with the development probably developed lenses and phone technology, which was developed to be used in the planes, probably the impact of having all this material could be pretty high for all these
yes, of course, yes, I think it was very high.
From this aspect, military effect, was it?
Yes, of course. It was very high because you can see behind the lines. You can see all the system of cables, all the system of artillery, all the system of infantry regiments, and what's very important also all the unit in back of the third line, in the fourth line. So it was very important. It was practiced in the beginning of the war with balloons and so on, and then with aircraft and with airplanes. But like I said, this was not enough for success. The technical, all those technical support wasn't enough when the soldiers were around.
Yeah, because I would thought that having this, I mean, for those who had this first, I didn't know who used, which army used first aerial photography. I mean,
I don't know who used it.
They could reach some really huge wins from having all this material, knowing the positions of the enemy troops and their stocks, like in any kind of material and so on. So some decisive battles could be won,
yes,
based on this.
Not only this kind of photography. All technology in the First World War was very important. I mean, all the weaponry, artillery, grenades, everything made for destruction, made for killing, for mass killing, and not only on the battlefield, on the first line, on those system which is connected with the rear, with the civilians and so on, but also all the militarization got those mass technique impact on society. Not only on the battlefield, but also in the production of food. We have the first time in the history the mass production of instant, so-called ersatz in German space. And, something. Yeah, it was the war in mass production, and it was the technological war, and the air photography was kind of that technological approach to fighting.
We are especially interested in all aspects of developments of photography, whether in material, technological developments, or in other utilitarian aspects like using photography. Okay, we didn't have photojournalism, so no reporters were embedded probably at that time with their armies, but also some kind of usages of photography were different, as we know it from before.
Yes, we have, maybe I can say, 5 kind of or more way of using the photographers and photography in propaganda. In soldiers in the trenches, it wasn't allowed to take photographs. Only for you were the official photographer or you were the officer and so on. And those officers who took the camera to the battlefield, they took the pictures of nature. And so the photography wasn't only for the fighting, but was also using for escaping of fighting. Also, there are a lot of nice images of mountains, nice images of everything. In a lot of photographs in our collection, in all the collection in the Europe of the First World War, you can be surprised of the portraits, of group portraits of happy soldiers, group portraits of the soldiers behind the tables with wine, also with the portraits before they went to the battlefield, and also a lot of nature, a lot of animals, and that's because the photographer wants to escape from reality.
Okay. Any other question?
I think that's a good closure.
Okay. Thank you, Marko.
Thank you.
Thank you for the